I stared at the letter in my hands, my coffee growing cold on the kitchen table. The audacity of these people was truly breathtaking. The Evergreen Estates Homeowners Association was demanding I pay $5,000 in architectural compliance fees for a shed I'd built on my own property, land that had been in my family for 3 generations. But this wasn't the first time Constance Merriweather, our HOA president, had tried to sink her perfectly manicured claws into my wallet. Little did she know, I had recently discovered something that would turn the tables completely. My name is Devin Thompson. I'm a land surveyor by profession, a detail that would prove to be Constance's undoing. After returning from 2 tours in Afghanistan, I settled in my grandfather's old place on the edge of what eventually became the Evergreen Estates development. I kept to myself, ran my small surveying business, and tried to live a quiet life. But everything changed 6 months ago when they built that ridiculous clubhouse. "This is harassment," I muttered, tossing the letter onto the pile of previous HOA notices. I gazed out my kitchen window at the gleaming new building that had sprung up just beyond my back property line, or what I had always assumed was my property line. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. "Devin? It's Tara Fleming from next door." Her voice sounded strained. "Did you get another letter?" "Sure did. Apparently, my tool shed violates Section 7.4 of the Covenant because it's painted the wrong shade of beige." Tara sighed. "Constance hit me with a $750 fine because my daughter's swing set is visible from the street. I don't know how much more of this we can take." I drummed my fingers on the table, my surveyor's instincts kicking in. "Tara, have you ever seen the actual property maps for this development? Not the marketing materials, but the official survey documents?" "No, why?" "Just wondering. Listen, I need to check something. I'll call you back." I hung up and headed to my office, pulling out the original property deed my grandfather had left me. Something had been bothering me about that clubhouse location ever since they broke ground on it. The construction had started so quickly after Constance announced it at the quarterly meeting, almost as if they were rushing to establish possession. After 3 hours of comparing my grandfather's deed with county records, I sat back in my chair stunned. I had to be sure before making any accusations, but what I was seeing looked very, very interesting. The next morning, I called an old colleague from the county assessor's office. "Hey, Marcus, I need a favor." 2 days later, I had my answer. And it was better than I could have imagined. The Evergreen Estates HOA had built their $1 million clubhouse partially on my land, approximately 6,800 square feet of it. In their haste to start construction before the fiscal year ended, they had relied on outdated surveys and never bothered to verify the actual property boundaries. My grandfather's deed clearly showed that the creek bed marked our property line, not the row of oak trees that everyone had assumed for years. I had all the documentation. Now I just needed to decide how to use it. As if on cue, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Constance herself standing on my porch, tapping her foot impatiently. Her blonde bob was meticulously styled, and her lips were pursed in that permanent expression of disapproval she wore like designer perfume. I opened the door with a smile. "Constance, what a surprise." "Mr. Thompson," she said, not bothering with pleasantries, "I've come to discuss your ongoing violations. The board has decided to place a lien on your property if you don't pay the accumulated fines by the end of the month. Is that right?" I leaned against the doorframe, enjoying the moment. "Why don't you come in? I have something that might interest you." Her eyes narrowed with suspicion, but curiosity won out. She followed me to the kitchen where I had the survey documents spread across the table. "What's all this?" she asked, setting her designer handbag on a chair. "These," I said, pointing to the official surveys, "are the actual property boundaries for my land and Evergreen Estates. And why would I care about that?" I smiled. "Because your new clubhouse? The one with the Olympic-sized pool and tennis courts? It's sitting on my property. About 20% of it, to be exact." The color drained from Constance's face. She grabbed the papers, her eyes darting back and forth as she processed what she was seeing. This is This is preposterous, she sputtered. These must be forgeries. They're certified by the county. Feel free to verify them yourself. I sat down, enjoying her discomfort. So here's what's going to happen. All fines against me are going to disappear. And we're going to discuss a reasonable rent for the use of my land. Constance's face flushed red. You can't do this. We've already spent over $1 million on that facility. That's unfortunate. I suppose you could tear down the portion on my land and rebuild it elsewhere. I shrugged. Or we can come to an agreement. This is extortion, she hissed. Actually, what you did was trespassing and unauthorized construction. What I'm offering is a solution. She snatched her purse from the chair. You'll be hearing from our attorneys, Mr. Thompson. After she stormed out, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee. I knew I had them cornered, but something told me Constance wouldn't go down without a fight. What I didn't know was just how dirty that fight would get, or that the clubhouse wasn't the only secret Evergreen Estates was hiding. The next evening, someone smashed my front window with a brick. Attached was a note that read simply, "Back off." I filed a police report, but without evidence of who threw it, there wasn't much they could do. The next day, I received multiple calls from neighbors asking why construction crews were suddenly digging up parts of the clubhouse foundation. I drove over to find workers hastily pouring new concrete footers several feet away from the original ones, clearly attempting to move the structure line. "Hold it!" I called out, approaching the site supervisor. "What exactly are you doing here?" The man looked uncomfortable. "Look, man, I'm just following orders. Mrs. Merriweather said there was an error in the original placement that needed immediate correction. Did she now?" I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. "And did she mention this land belongs to me, not the HOA?" The man glanced at his crew. "We're just doing what we're paid for." "Well, you're tampering with evidence now. I suggest you stop work immediately before I call the police." After they reluctantly packed up and left, I decided it was time to stop playing nice. I contacted Timothy Lawson, an attorney friend who specialized in property disputes. "They're trying to retroactively fix their mistake," Timothy said after reviewing the documentation. "Classic damage control. But we've got them dead to rights, Devin. The building permits were issued based on incorrect property lines. They can't just move a foundation and pretend it was always there. So what's our next move? I'm filing an emergency injunction to stop any further construction. Then we're suing for trespassing, unauthorized use of land, and attempting to destroy evidence." 2 days later, Constance called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't technically a member since my property predated the development, but I showed up anyway, accompanied by Timothy. The community center was packed with homeowners, many of whom gave me dirty looks as we entered. Constance stood at the podium, looking immaculate in a designer suit, her expression grave. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you may have heard, we're facing a legal challenge regarding the new clubhouse property. Mr. Thompson here," she pointed at me accusingly, "is claiming that a portion of our new community facility is on his land." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "This is nothing but an opportunistic cash grab," she continued. "He waited until construction was complete before making these outrageous claims, clearly hoping to extort money from our community fund." I started to stand, but Timothy put a restraining hand on my arm. "Let her dig her hole deeper," he whispered. Constance displayed a slide showing property boundaries completely different from the actual survey. "As you can see, our construction is fully within Evergreen Estates property lines. Mr. Thompson is simply trying to take advantage of a clerical error in some outdated paperwork." Timothy and I exchanged glances. This was more than misunderstanding now, this was fraud. When she finally opened the floor for questions, I stood up. The room went silent. "Ms. Merriweather," I said calmly, "could you please tell everyone when you first became aware that the clubhouse might be encroaching on my property?" She smiled condescendingly. "There is no encroachment, Mr. Thompson. That's the entire point. So you're saying you never received an email from Brighton Construction on March 15th, warning about potential boundary issues before breaking ground? Her smile faltered slightly. I don't recall any such communication. I pulled out my phone. That's interesting, because I have a copy right here, forwarded to me by someone on your board who was concerned about potential liability. Would you like me to read it aloud? The room erupted in whispers as Constance's face hardened. This meeting is about informing homeowners of a nuisance lawsuit, she said sharply. Not about rehashing construction details. It's about telling the truth, I countered. Like how you've known for months that you built on my land, and instead of approaching me honestly, you tried to alter property records and physically move foundation markers. That's slander, she snapped. Security, please remove this man. A uniformed security guard approached uncertainly, but Timothy stood up. I wouldn't do that. We're lawfully attending a public meeting, and we have evidence of multiple criminal acts committed by your board president. The guard wisely backed away. An older man in the front row stood up. I want to see this email he's talking about. Me too, called another homeowner. Constance banged her gavel. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene after consulting with our attorneys. As people began filing out, many stopped to talk to me. Word spread quickly, and I found myself surrounded by homeowners asking questions. It turned out Constance had been ruling with an iron fist for years, using HOA funds with minimal oversight and targeting anyone who questioned her authority. She fined me $2,000 because my mother in a wheelchair needed a ramp, one woman told me. Said it decreased property values. My kids can't play basketball in our own driveway because she says the hoop is unsightly, added another neighbor. By the time I left, I had collected contact information from dozens of homeowners who were fed up with Constance's regime and wanted to help with my case. That night, as I was reviewing documents with Timothy at my kitchen table, we heard a noise outside. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of someone near my storage shed. Call the police, I told Timothy, grabbing a flashlight before heading out the back door. As I approached the shed, I saw flames beginning to lick up one side. A figure was running toward the tree line. Hey! I shouted, sprinting after them. The person was fast, but years of military training gave me an edge. I tackled them just before they reached the trees, and we both went down hard. Get off me! Screamed a familiar voice. I rolled the person over, shining my light on their face. It wasn't Constance as I'd expected, but her son, Bradley Merriweather, a college kid known for doing his mother's dirty work around the neighborhood. What the hell are you doing? I demanded, keeping him pinned. Nothing. I was just walking. With a gas can? I nodded toward the red container he'd dropped during our scuffle. By the time the police arrived, Timothy and neighbors had managed to extinguish the fire before it did much damage. Bradley was arrested for attempted arson, and I made sure to press charges. The next morning, my phone rang constantly with calls from local news outlets. Apparently, a board member with a conscience had leaked emails showing Constance had not only known about the boundary issue from the beginning but had deliberately fast-tracked construction to establish possession, hoping adverse possession laws would eventually give them claim to my land. Even more damning, financial records showed Constance had been skimming HOA funds for years, using inflated contractor bids and taking kickbacks. The Clubhouse project had been her biggest scheme yet. Nearly $200,000 had disappeared into various shell companies that all traced back to her brother-in-law's accounting firm. 3 days later, Constance was arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit arson. As she was led away in handcuffs, she screamed that I had ruined her life and that I would regret it. Her perfect Bob was decidedly less perfect by then. With Constance gone, the interim HOA board approached me with their hat in hand. The clubhouse was built, the money was spent, and relocating it would bankrupt the association. We're prepared to offer you $100,000 for the land, said the new president, Doug Winters. Timothy and I exchanged glances. That's less than market value for undeveloped land in this area, Timothy pointed out. And it doesn't account for the improvements already on it. What do you want, Devin? Doug asked wearily. The homeowners are the victims here too. Most of us had no idea what Constance was doing. I thought about it for a moment. I don't want to sell. Their faces fell. But I'm willing to lease it, I continued. 10-year renewable lease, $4,000 per month, with annual increases tied to inflation. And I get full membership privileges without having to join the HOA. Relief washed over their faces. It was a fair offer, less than what they'd have to pay for commercial space elsewhere, and far less than the cost of moving the clubhouse. There's one more condition, I added. You need to cancel all outstanding fines against homeowners that were issued under Constance's leadership and review the architectural guidelines. People should be able to have basketball hoops and reasonable accommodations without harassment. That's actually reasonable, Doug admitted. I think we can make this work. We signed the agreement 2 weeks later. The monthly rent payments began flowing into my account, and I found myself with an unexpected second income stream. I used part of it to create a legal defense fund for homeowners dealing with unreasonable HOAs across the county. As for the clubhouse I now technically owned a piece of, I make a point of using the pool every weekend. Sometimes Tara and her family join me. Her daughter's swing set remains proudly visible from the street, and my tool shed is now painted a shade that definitely isn't in the approved color palette. Constance eventually took a plea deal for reduced jail time in exchange for returning most of the stolen funds. Her son Bradley got community service and probation. I hear they moved to Arizona after everything was settled. Last month, I was approached about joining the HOA board. I politely declined, but I do attend every meeting. Someone has to keep an eye on things, after all. It's funny how life works out sometimes. I never wanted anything to do with the Evergreen Estates HOA. Now they're my tenants, and every month when that rent check arrives, I can't help but smile at the irony. All because someone didn't bother to check a property line before building their $1 million clubhouse. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. In my case, it came with a swimming pool and tennis courts I never asked for, but certainly enjoy using, free of charge, of course.